His take on Dumbo from 2019. The IMDb plot summary: a young elephant whose oversized ears enable him to fly helps save a struggling circus, but when the circus plans a new venture, Dumbo and his friends discover dark secrets beneath its shiny veneer. So, directed by Tim Burton, obviously, and starring Colin Farrell, Michael Keaton, and Danny DeVito. Kind of talk a little more about the film itself, but just why I think this is a wild card in the sense of I feel like this movie is a little bit unfairly maligned, and I don't want to call it a hidden gem per se because I don't think it's like an incredible movie, but I do think it's an important part of his filmography, especially his later filmography, that I think deserves to be studied and seen. Before making the case in this, I just want to mention too that we did cover the original Dumbo before, so I'll post the link below in another episode we did in the past. It's one of my favorite Disney animated movies of all time, and this is one of those live action remakes of a Disney classic, which literally 9 times out of 10 are terrible, and just expand movies in ways that no one cares about, ruins the fun of them, takes all the songs away. And yeah, this movie is doing those things. Like the songs are gone, the sense of kind of magic is definitely gone. There's so much extra plot in this movie that wasn't in the original Dumbo, which the original Dumbo is like an hour long. I think it's like
Right.
67 minutes or something. This movie is, basically 2 hours. But what I think makes this movie interesting is when I saw this and whenever I go back and kind of watch the movie, because maybe I've seen it like 3 or 4 times since it
Hmm.
originally came out, it feels to me like Tim Burton sort of in the same way that Edward Scissorhands was kind of like about him being an artist. This to me feels like him kind of looking back on like the death of his career almost and sort of saying, this is what ruined me and I'm now done. It almost feels like this is his swan song as a filmmaker in terms of the I feel like he is Dumbo in this movie in terms of being a unique outsider whose talents are then used for his own enjoyment and then abused by big corporations. And then at the end of the movie, he actually goes, unlike the original Dumbo, he gets freed and goes back to all the elephants in the jungle, and he uses his talents, which is flying with his ears, for his own enjoyment again to entertain his own kind, and he's free of the demands of the capitalist system that was taking him under his wing and trying to exploit him throughout the third act of this movie. And I feel like that really is what has happened or did happen to Burton, especially over the last 20 years when he started becoming just a normal blockbuster filmmaker who just seemed like his heart wasn't in it anymore. And there's a Burton style, and we're gonna hire you to go deliver this style. And he goes and he makes the movie like the Alice in Wonderland or the Sweeney Todd or the Charlie and Chocolate Factory. It's almost like an AI could have gone and said, "Make me a Tim Burton version of this," and boom, he's making it. And for better or for worse, those movies did really well. So I
Right.
think he was sort of trapped in this thing, but not having a good time and not enjoying it. And I get that sense when watching this movie, even though after this movie came out too, he said, he had a horrible experience, and it almost, again, I didn't think he would ever make a movie again. It felt like he was so over with the whole experience. But I don't know. This movie is, I think, unique in its filmography in that it is, to me, feels like his admission about what went wrong in his own career over the last 20 years and a way of him saying, look, I'm done. Like, I'm free now. I'm just going to go off and just entertain myself. So I think this movie's unique in its filmography and deserved to be studied more than a lot of the other films that he's made in the last 20 years. So I'll get in more of my thoughts on the film, but that's just why I put it on the list and why I
Hmm.
think it's fascinating in a certain way. Even though as a film, I don't think it works perfectly. Though I don't think it's as bad as a lot of people say personally. I think it's still enjoyable on a certain level, but it just fascinated me what I can read into this in terms of Burton sort of exposing him. Thoughts on
Yeah.
maybe his own career. So what were your thoughts on maybe remind listeners what you think of Dumbo, the original, and then talk about your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I mean, Dumbo original is incredible. I haven't seen it as many times as probably you have, but it's one of the most emotional, sweet movies from the Disney animated era.
Hmm.
It's hard to top that. And the whole scene of him and the mother and all of that is sort of iconic. And it's a simple story, but it has a lot of depth to it, actually. I hear you on all of that reading, and that's why I think it makes sense for it to be a wild card in that sense, because he's so public, it seems, with his own career and how he's been feeling. My answer to that is that then don't apply that on a classic, you know? Like there's a reason why this movie is a classic. I mean, these live action remakes, like you said upfront, like they are sort of pointless to begin with. But
Hmm.
the last thing I want to see is a filmmaker kind of projecting their own life and admissions on a movie, which is just so far from what the movie is about. It's a different movie. Then don't call it Dumbo, call it something else. It could have, honestly, I would want to watch that movie. Maybe it's Flunko or something else. It's a snail with, really long something else, whatever,
Yeah.
some other character,
Yeah,
not
yeah.
this. And so, but even if I put that on the side, like, I think the movie just doesn't work for me for the most part. I will say though, and we can get into more into the movie, is that there were moments where I was like, oh, actually, this is not so bad. That it kept happening over and over again, which is sort of what made me keep watching the movie. There's something interesting. Oh, there's something interesting happening between Eva Green and Colin Farrell. Like these are
Hmm.
two kind of outsiders in their own world, lost souls. They're coming together, they're helping out each other. That's kind of fun. Or when they do go to the big Michael Keaton circus, like, and a lot of it is CGI, but it actually looks pretty good. Like it comes together pretty good. Danny DeVito is interesting. I think his
Hmm.
character, that you think that, oh, this is a sellout who's going to exploit all the people. But even though he is not as courageous as Colin Farrell's character, but he has his heart is in the right place. And I think that's kind of interesting to see. So there are elements here and there. But I think the biggest failing of the movie is that it's not about Dumbo.
Right. Right.
You have no, even though Dumbo is very cute the way they're rendered Dumbo, but the whole point of the original movie and all these movies from Disney is that you're supposed to fall in love and care for your lead character. And this movie is about everybody else but Dumbo. And Dumbo is just a cute toy in the movie, which is kind of ironic if he's using that as a device to portray his own thing. But maybe that's the point. Maybe he
Hmm.
sees himself as a toy that amounts to nothing. So, but as a movie, it's not a pleasurable experience at all. And then you have all these characters, the children, especially I mean, I hate saying bad things about children in
Yeah.
movies, but like that girl is just, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
really bad. Just looks all of it. Like, I mean, sorry, Tandy Newton. I know she's your daughter. Not that you listen to
That
this
wait,
podcast.
that's her daughter?
I
What?
immediately I was like, oh, the forehead gave away. I was like, oh, I
Oh
know.
my
She looks
gosh.
very
I had
familiar.
no idea that was her daughter.
Yeah,
Oh man.
it's a rude thing to say, but it's just
Oh,
not good. And it's sad to me because Tim Burton actually is a pretty good director of kids. Like he's gotten such good performances from children in his entire career, but not here.
not in this movie.
But
Yeah.
it's just so much going on. There's no need, so much bloat. And I wish this movie was maybe not Dumbo, or if you wanted Dumbo, should have been stripped down, like a simple movie. Because, yeah, to your point, like all the themes of Burton's characters and stories are in there. And it could have been that swan song if it were only stripped down. But maybe that's his yelp and his cry that even when I'm trying to make that, they won't let me. And it
Yeah,
has all this other paraphernalia and bells and whistles and things on it.
yeah. I mean, I think you're definitely spot on in that Dumbo isn't really kind of in the movie at all. And in a
I
way,
feel
it's
nothing for him.
sort of like that's what the first movie is. And if you're gonna make a reimagining, try to do something different. And I think by creating human characters, the first movie didn't have any human characters in it at all. It was just about animals. And if they had taken that path, it would have been something maybe more akin to like the Lion King movies, which are even more
Right.
pointless. They're taking the Dumbo element and creating a story around it. And I really think Danny DeVito, Colin Farrell sort of, but Danny DeVito and Michael Keaton, I think both do great jobs in this
They're
movie. And
good.
they're the ones who are interesting. Like the Dumbo character's not. The kids definitely are not at all. They could have easily been removed and the movie really wouldn't have been affected at all. But it's the human characters that keep my interest in this movie. And I'm definitely not as bored as I am during most of these other Disney remakes. Either they're trying to literally do the same thing as the original, then why are you doing this at all?
Right. I
Or they're
understand.
adding too much that I don't care about to characters that we already had. This movie is creating new characters. And I care about them. It just the circus stuff to me is interesting, and the Danny DeVito arc of getting absorbed by the Walt
That
Disney
stuff is good.
Company essentially. Like this is interesting, I think, and that's what keeps my interest. Even though Dumbo sort of actually in the second act, it kind of disappears for a while, and it's just
Right.
about how Danny DeVito and Colin Farrell are dealing with this new, being absorbed by the Michael Keaton circus Coney Island thing, and you kind of forget Dumbo's even in the movie. And then
Right.
Dumbo doesn't really have an arc either. There's
No,
not like a big, moment between reuniting with his mom. I mean, I guess that kind of happens at the end, but you don't really care because you don't
you don't
care
really
about
care.
Dumbo. So it
Exactly.
doesn't give you that heartfelt feeling that you do when Dumbo and his mom are reuniting in the first movie. It's like,
Yeah.
oh my God, this is what I, want for this little elephant guy. But,
Yeah.
and they take out the pink elephants sequence, which I remember when this movie was announced, I was like, oh, interesting. Tim Burton with Dumbo. I could see that working. Oh my God, I can't wait to see what he does with the pink elephant sequence, which is that amazing sequence in the first
Hmm.
movie where Dumbo gets drunk and hallucinates all these crazy
Right.
and in this movie they don't do it at all. It's just like
I don't know
they
why. Instead, you have,
there's some balloon elephants or bubble
oh
elephants
yeah.
being made, so they like allude to it. But like that was the one thing I remember when they announced the movie. I'm like, I just can't wait to see what Tim Burton does with that sequence, and they don't even do it. Again, all that being said, I just don't hate this movie as much as I think a lot of other people do. And in terms of Disney remakes, I think it's
Yeah.
actually kind of one of the stronger ones, which doesn't say much because most of them are terrible. But it's this element of I really do think Keaton represents Walt Disney. Burton is Dumbo being kind of shoved in there and being commercialized, and they don't really care about his talents, and they're taking his nets away and they're letting him fail, and if he fails, kind of on him, and then at the end he escapes all that and he just gets to fly with the elephants in the jungle and just be off on his own, like much like Edward Scissorhands, right? He had to go off back to the
Right.
tower. Dumbo doesn't have to be alone, but he just has to be with his own kind in the jungle and free from being exploited by the circus. Which I don't know. I like that. I guess intellectually, when I see the movie, I appreciate that more than I do
Yeah.
actually watching it.
Yeah.
So maybe I'm just reading too much into it, and this wasn't what Tim Burton had in mind. And he, again, I think he just he hated making this movie from what I've heard, and is not proud of it. I don't know. Maybe I'm just seeing something that isn't there, but I still think this
Probably
is a
is.
deserved sort of part of his filmography. I think is more important than was that Mrs. Pettigrew's Weird Children
Yeah.
thing or Dark
Dark
Shadows or some of these
Shadows.
other movies that he's made over the last 10 years, which I think are not good.
It's better
I'll put
than
it that
those for sure.
way.
Yeah, I will say that. But like I said, do not call it Dumbo. Make it call it something
Yeah,
else if you're doing this, you know?
that's fair. Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hi there, it's Alex. If you like the review and discussion Karan and I just had, make sure you subscribe to our channel, Movies That Shaped Us, to get full episodes. Every other Wednesday, Karan and I review a new release and then discuss 6 other movies made by that film's actor or director and how they shaped us. Subscribe right now or follow our podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts via the link in the description below. Hope you join us for the journey.